I bring to you a comparison of World Heroes 2, which was developed by ADK and SNK and released in 1993. The premise of this sequel is the same as the previous game, where fighters from different eras of history based on real-life figures compete to determine who is the best fighter in history. The 8 playable fighters from World Heroes plus Geegus return for this sequel, with nearly every returning fighter receiving additional special moves. 6 new fighters join the mix, such as Johnny Maximum, a football player based on Joe Montana as he's wearing the 49ers colors and is from 1989, and Captain Kidd, a pirate based on William Kidd, who uses nautical and marine life projectiles such as a pirate ship and a shark. Geegus is now Neo Geegus and is a sub-boss, with the new final boss Dio added. In addition to the new fighters and added moves for the returning fighters, the gameplay mechanics were tweaked for World Heroes 2. Game speed is faster, which rectified a criticism of the first game. You can deflect projectiles back to their sender by blocking it at the last possible moment. This increases the speed of the projectile. Deflected projectiles can be returned to you, creating a ping-pong effect. Throws can be reversed with several back and forth attempts before someone is successful. The difficulty of the CPU opponents has been ramped up. They fight more aggressively, frequently deflect your projectiles, react quickly to your attacks, and catch you with throws. Dio is on another level, which has unfortunately led me to outbursts. Major changes were made to the deathmatch mode. Several stages now take place outside the confines of a wrestling ring or arena. New hazards were added, such as a buzzsaw, which moves across the fighting plane and background. When hit, you're knocked back and it's possible to get hit again, creating a juggling effect. Another new hazard is a satellite beam, which shoots bolts of electricity at spots placed on the ground. Like the buzzsaw, it's possible for a fighter to be juggled by the electricity. Finally, one of the more frustrating stages to deal with is the oil sewer stage. Barrels of oil mixed with water flow onto the fighting plane, creating a slippery effect. The direction of the slipperiness changes throughout the match. Separate health meters were replaced by a seesaw health meter for this mode. When you land hits, the meter moves in your favor, which is red on the player 1 side and blue on the player 2 side. Once the meter color fully reaches either end, the fighter is knocked down and the referee in the background will count to 10. You will wiggle the joystick and button mash to get up. Some of your health is restored and the match continues. 3 knockdowns guarantee a victory, though a knockout can occur after 1 fall.
8, 9, 10.
World Heroes 2 was ported to the Super NES and PC Engine Arcade CD-ROM. For the sake of authenticity, gameplay for all 3 versions were recorded using original cartridges and discs on original hardware. The first home port I will cover is the Super NES one, which was ported by Saurus and published by Takara and released in 1994. As you can see, the intro does not feature Hanzo staring down the other fighters. The Super NES port features several options to alter the gameplay. You can use separate buttons for strong and weak attacks instead of pressing or tapping the button for strong and weak hits. You can choose from 3 game speeds. Finally, you can opt to use separate health bars or the seesaw meter for all matches, regardless of which mode you select. Thus, you can play the death matches, or should I say survival matches, using the separate health bars, or use the seesaw meter in normal mode. The rules for each match depend on the meter you use. The order in which you fight your opponents is the same as the arcade, which is the first 6 matches against the newcomers, followed by the next 4 against the returning cast chosen randomly, followed by Neo Geegus and Dio. The controls are responsive and special moves are simple to execute. On the other hand, executing combos in this port is harder than the arcade, as it requires more precise timing due to the slower attack speed. Not all the hits within a combo are executed as they should be in the arcade. The difficulty of this port has been reduced. Opponents do not fight as aggressively and it's easier to move in and execute throws, which is how I win most of my matches. In the arcade version, you're often caught in throws if you fight close rank battles. Playing it on the default difficulty setting, I could complete the game without continuing. I wish I could do that in the Neo Geo version. Inputting a code at the title and character select screens allows you to play as Neo Geegus and Dio in single player mode. You can find the codes in the video description. If you fight as either character, you must battle all 16 opponents instead of the normal 12 to complete the game. The order in which you fight them is random except for Neo Geegus and Dio, which are always the final two opponents. Neo Geegus and Dio are readily available in versus mode, so no code necessary there. The game display is letterbox, reducing the pixel height of the play area from 224 pixels to 183. Luckily, the heads-up display is within the play area like in the first World Heroes port. Unfortunately, the character sprites, fighters, portraits, and background details have been compressed. Here's a side-by-side view of muscle power sprite between the Neo Geo and Super NES versions. I made sure to use the same animation frame to make the comparison fair. This port boasts colorful graphics, but as you would expect from a home port of an arcade game during that era, not all background details, people, and animations are present. Some notable omissions include no vehicle in the right side of Johnny Maximum stage, missing turrets in the Bus and Kim Dragon stage, ninjas do not appear in Hanzo's stage, no Vulture and Captain Kid stage, the buzzsaw in the survival matches only appear along the fighting plane, and the banner does not drop in Fuma's stage when a round is won. The bonus rounds were omitted. While that's not a crucial feature, it's a nice break from the action. The referee is absent in the survival matches. The pre-fight animations are missing for some characters. Not all victory poses are present. Line scrolling effects in the foreground are present, which wasn't the case in the first Super Nintendo World Heroes port. The endings don't show as many images as the arcade version. The grunts and groans are the regular moves, and the called moves for special attacks are here. The soundtrack is what you would expect from a Super NES game, which is a good thing. The tracks restart at the beginning of each round. Many of the announcer voice samples are missing, such as the name of the game at the title screen, the name of the country, names of the fighters for each matchup, match type upon its selection, and the 10 count in survival mode. Let's look at more side-by-side footage between the Neo Geo and Super Nintendo port. Next is a PC Engine arcade CD-ROM port, which was handled by Argent and ADS according to Moby Games and published by Hudson Soft. This port was also released in 1994. The intro is nearly identical to the arcade sans the spinning globe. The options screen in this port is limited to difficulty selection and button configuration. While this game takes advantage of the 6-button pad, the standard PC Engine controller works fine. By default, buttons 2 and 1 are used for punches and kicks, and the run button is used for throws and taunts, the latter of which serves no practical use. The punch button is also used for throws, making use of the run button unnecessary. The order of battles in this port is the same as the arcade. Character movement, attack speed, and execution of special moves and combos are on par with the arcade version. Not only are the mechanics consistent with the arcade version, the difficulty is as well for the reasons I mentioned earlier in the video. The CPU opponents behave like their arcade counterparts. There is one element that eases the initial difficulty of a match, and that is the fighters are spaced farther apart at the start of a round compared to the arcade. This gives you more breathing room to react to any initial attacks by your opponent. The heads-up display is in a black bar, as was the case in the Art of Fighting port. There is minimal letterboxing at the bottom of the screen. At 183 pixels, the height of the play area is the same as the Super Nintendo port. I did the comparison using screenshots from the Moby Games website. Despite identical play area heights between the two ports, the graphical details in this version have less compression. Details such as the character sprites, portraits, and background objects are taller in this port compared to the Super Nintendo version, and in some cases are the same height as the arcade but narrower. Using the last point I mentioned, here's a side-by-side view of Muscle Power Sprite using the same animation frame. There is no background parallax scrolling in the stages in this port, but there is line scrolling in the foreground. The graphics are colorful but not as bright as the Neo Geo version. The missing background details and animations differ from the Super Nintendo port. Notable omissions include no background movement in Eric's stages in both normal and deathmatch modes. The monks are missing in Shura's stage. The tire tracks and footprints in the snow for Rasputin's stage are missing. There's no moving clouds in Neo Geegus and Dio stages. The people in the background do not animate in Fuma and Jan's stages, yet they do in Kim Dragon's stage and the deathmatch wrestling ring. The referee is absent in deathmatch mode. Both bonus stages were retained in this port. The pre-fight animations are present along with the victory poses. I thought it was cool that they retained the joystick prompt in deathmatch mode when you are knocked down. The endings appear to be intact, though I didn't test it with every character. I don't have enough skill nor patience to do that. As far as I can tell, all grunts, groans, calls, special moves, and announcer voices are accounted for and sound accurate. An excellent arranged soundtrack was composed for the intro and stages. The tracks restart at the beginning of each round. Chiptune music was used for the character select, matchup, and victory quote screens. Load times vary before the start of a match, as indicated by a countdown timer in the matchup screen. Occasionally the timer resets. There is no loading between rounds. There is minimal loading before a match when you continue. Here is more side-by-side footage between the Neo Geo and PC Engine port of World Heroes 2. The World Heroes series would see two more entries in World Heroes 2 Jet and World Heroes Perfect in 1994 and 1995 respectively. These two releases had the deathmatch mode removed. The popularity of the series waned after Part 2 as 2 Jet and Perfect each received only one home port outside of the Neo Geo. Several World Heroes characters would appear in SNK's Neo Geo Battle Coliseum, which was released in 2005. For the two home ports covered in this video, the PC Engine port is the way to go if you want a playing experience that mimics the arcade version. If you want a less frustrating time playing through the single-player game and the additional gameplay options, then the Super Nintendo port is for you. We will close out by showing you gameplay of all 3 versions of World Heroes 2. Thanks for watching.
Round one. Fight.